FGG Productions presents Dancing in the Snow, an Underfell Sands love story. Written by Funny Gara Girl. Read to you by Aya Kyung. Chapter 1. The world was slow to come into focus. Everything was fuzzy and soft, but it smelled heavenly, like the last perfumes of a dying flower. Dahlia let her eyes flutter open, only to shut them immediately after to block the sunlight assaulting her vision. Turning onto her side was a big mistake, as she realized just how sore everything was. Why did she hurt so bad? The memories flooded back, and Dahlia sat up with a start. How was she alive? Pain blossomed and dropped her faster than she could believe. Alive. Dahlia was alive? And in a great amount of pain. How far had she actually fallen? It was impossible to look up and gauge the depth due to the light and pulsing headache. Her hand gripped into a fist as she fought to get the ache to dull down. When she finally did manage to open her eyes, she realized she was on a pile of wilted yellow flowers. Several of their weak petals had come off in her hand. That's where the smell was coming from. Dahlia looked around her in a daze as a soft breeze took the petals from her hand. Where was she? The cavern was oddly clean carved. No, not a cavern, she realized. Ruins. A cracked archway at the end of the room provided that bit of information. Dahlia sucked in a hard breath when she attempted to stand. Her ankle was the nastiest shade of blue with lovely purple spots. Well, at least it matched her outfit. Despite everything, her costume had survived with little casualty. Her thick cloak had protected the majority of it. Dahlia was still proud of it. Wish.com had provided the majority of her mesh pieces, painted to look like light blue and purple scales. It covered her arms and legs. A simple pair of jean shorts covered her, with a length of blue chiffon fabric sewn to her belt. It was meant to simulate a mermaid's tail. Her top was a purple shirt, elastic pulling in tight beneath her breasts and toughing out after that. She had left the majority of her long blonde hair down, only having braided a few pieces to weave pearls in. Her friend, Alice, had made prosthetic fins to wear over her ears. Finally, her reigning joy, her mask. Alice had guided her on how to make it step by step, but had ultimately allowed her to do everything on her own. Alice, of course, had to do the casting, but Dahlia had spent weeks painting it and shaping the front exactly how she wanted it. Blue and purple scales had been painted precisely on the cheeks and around the eyes. Those lovely things were covered inside with black mesh to give it more allure. And finally, a nice dark purple on the lips to bring the whole thing together. Dahlia flopped back on the bed of flowers and closed her eyes. But then she began to laugh. Her arms came up, removing her mask and then covering her eyes as she laughed and laughed. God, she had done it. She had actually done it, and she was laughing about it. How many young girls were hearing the news and laughing right now as well? She didn't even care that she was most likely going to die in this odd little place. Dahlia had freed herself, and many others. And now, she could breathe. Her hands moved down to rest on her stomach, as she did just that. Several deep breaths later, and Dahlia still had the world's widest smile. Alice would hear the news and clap. She would stand up and clap with tears in her eyes, not because she was a victim, but because she knew people who were. She would clap and take her spare key to Dahlia's apartment and secure everything valuable before the landlord evicted her. Alice would be proud of her. Dahlia slowly sat up again and looked down at her ankle. Frowning, she thought of what she could do to at least be able to walk around. A rustling sound caught her attention. Could there be wild animals all the way down here? She was screwed if there was. But nothing was with her. Dahlia scanned the room, finding nothing but the flowers. Flower with eyes? There was a flower with eyes that blinked up at her. Dahlia froze only a moment as she processed what she was seeing. And then she backpedaled away as best she could and screamed. And then the flower screamed and darted into the ground. Her heart was hammering 1,000,000 miles a minute. Was she hallucinating? Were these flowers actually toxic and she was high as a freaking kite? The flower slowly popped his head back out of the ground, shaking and watching her. "Oh, what the fuck?" Dahlia choked. The little shivering flower rose a little more from the ground, remaining wary. "Hello?" Dahlia shrieked again, as the flower fucking spoke words. "Oh, that is not good. I am tripping hard on something. Ah, fuck," she whispered to herself, curling up slightly. Are you okay?" the little flower asked. She almost had to laugh. A flower was asking if she was okay. Oh, how far she had sunk. Nope, not in the slightest. Dahlia sat forward, looking the flower in the eye and smiling a slightly delusional smile. When the flower didn't answer, and only gave her an odd look, she chuckled and shook her head. "So, what should I call you?" It perked up. "Oh, I'm Flowey. Flowey the flower." Dahlia snickered into her hand. Oh God, how cute. "Well, Flowey, it's nice to meet you. I'm Dahlia. Dahlia the mermaid." Clever. Not to be rude, but I'm pretty certain you're a human." "Oh?" She tilted her head. "Why would you think that?" Dahlia positioned herself so she was laying on her stomach, with her chin in her hand. Flowey began to sweat, and couldn't hold eye contact for very long. "Your face?" Dahlia blinked a few times. "Oh, my bad." She reached behind her and picked up her mask, slipping it into place on her face. "There. Better?" They made a face. "Well, I mean, yes, but that's not... Okay, new question." Their leaves pressed together like hands. "What are you doing down here?" Dahlia shrugged. "Tripping out on toxic flowers? Enjoying a conversation with a talking flower hallucination? Enjoying my first taste of true freedom in a very long time? All of these things. Or maybe none of these things. I could actually be dead for all I know." A light of understanding entered Flowey's eyes. This was just a normal human, in a state of shock, obviously in pain if the tension in her shoulders and the color of her ankle said anything. But with that mask, that disguise could actually work. Fool her. She could survive. He would have to show her this was real, though. "So, you seem like you could use some help," Flowey offered. "I could get you a stick to lean on." "Oh, a stick would be wonderful. Tell me, how far do these ruins go?" Flowey was a little disturbed by the enthusiasm in her voice. "Well, they go pretty deep. But it's a dangerous place to be. Lots of old traps and monsters are down here, and it's pretty kill or be killed down here." Dahlia hummed as she rolled onto her back. Traps and monsters. Well, you only live once. But the universe just gave her a second chance. Go big or die, bitch. But trying to explore an unsafe and unknown area with an injury would definitely lean her more into the or die category. But again, maybe she was already dead. It's not like she had anything to lose. Oh, that's right. Dahlia sat up and put her finger to her lip. She had been so focused on how people would react to what she had done, she failed to realize her best friend was also receiving the news that she had jumped to her death. Great gods in heaven, should Dahlia ever see Alice again, please don't let her punches hurt too severely. A large and thick stick landed by her hand, breaking her thoughts. Flowey was in front of her with a concerned expression. I got the stick. Now came the hard part. Dahlia took a few deep breaths before pushing herself up and leaning heavily on the stick for support. It was a wobbly start, but with some added assistance from Flowey, she was up and hobbling along. The soreness was a constant presence that made the tip of her nose sweat. Okay, maybe she was alive. But this still had to be some form of drug trip, right? The room adjacent to the one she had started in was relatively small as well. Only this time, instead of a cracked archway, a large gray door took up a portion of the other side of the room. On the floor nearby were 5, what looked like paving stones? Flowey used his vines to press down on certain stones. Wait, switches! They were switches! A click was heard and the door opened. Puzzles and traps like these are everywhere. I can help as best I can. But, he seemed nervous. Look, I'm not great in a fight. Should a monster try to fight us? I get it. You handle all the big brain stuff. I handle all the big muscle stuff, she said, balancing on one foot so she could flex. If he could see her face right now, it would be perfect. I guess? Can you even fight like that? Dahlia raspberried her lips. Please, I broke this one bitch's nose buck naked with my hands tied behind my back after she... Okay, that part of the story isn't important. Point is, I've fought with worse. How bad could it actually be? Flowey seemed to sigh, but not at all the same, and continued to guide her. The next puzzle was simple. 2 switches needed to be pulled out of 3 choices. Flowey knew exactly which ones to pull. Dahlia couldn't keep her head still as she took in the brilliant expanse of the ruins. Nothing like this even seemed feasible under a mountain. She could imagine how it all looked in its prime. Hey, watch out! Flowey's shout broke her out of her own head, and she realized she was about to walk into a batch of spikes. Geez, if she wasn't hurt already, that would have done the job in a heartbeat. She took a step back, and Flowey sighed in frustration. I'm trying to help you. Please at least try not to accidentally kill yourself. My bad, I'm sorry. It's just, this place is amazing. I've never seen anything like it. They don't have ruins like this on the surface? Well, sure, but most of them are in other countries. I never had the ability to travel around and see them. This is literally the most impressive thing I've seen in my life. Flowey was stunned for a moment. Humans were supposed to be these awful, selfish, greedy, and violent beings. They didn't try to understand things. They didn't marvel at the world around them. They did everything to survive and come out on top. But here was an actual human, nearly walking into death in a state of awe. She had apologized, shown fear and surprise in front of him. She was the embodiment of everything humans were not supposed to be. So why did he still feel so uneasy around her? they didn't have time for his overthinking. She could show up at any time. Come on, we still have a lot to get through. He showed her how to get through the spikes, and answered all questions about why they were there in the first place. Defense seemed to be a worthy answer to her. They were halfway through the next long hallway before Dahlia spoke up again. So, Flowey, where exactly are we going? The exit. Ah, okay. The exit! She yelled. Flowey flinched. Like, the exit? Like, to the surface? That's the goal, isn't it? He asked uneasily. No! Desperation had entered her voice. I can't go back to the surface, Flowey. Things happened, and... Oh. He had gotten it wrong. She meant to be here. Maybe not in the way she thought initially, but she was here to stay. Dahlia tugged at her fingers and paced a small distance as best she could. Flowey sighed. Okay, look, getting to the surface is incredibly difficult, and honestly not a good idea. That exit is all the way on the other end of the underground. But the ruins exit isn't too far. Trust me, any life you might want to make here, you don't want to make it in the ruins. Dahlia paused as she thought about that a little more. Okay, so what is life like here? You never really explained that. She limped up to him as fast as she could. He looked up at her with an incredulous face. I did mention the kill or be killed thing, right? Yes, but that doesn't tell me anything about the normal lives of monsters in the underground, or even much about the underground in general. I feel like these are things I should know if I'm going to be living here. She came around in front of him, halting their progress. Flowey sighed and gestured with his leaf to take a seat. Gladly, Dahlia thought, as she took weight off her injury. Flowey paced before her, trying to piece together the best way to explain all of this quickly and effectively. Okay, first thing, these are the ruins, also known as home. This is where monster kind first settled after being trapped in the mountain. Just past home, where we are trying to go, is Snowden. It is very cold and always snowing. Beyond that is Waterfall, a relatively quiet place with frequent rainstorms. Next is Hotland. Let me guess. Always sweltering hot? Dahlia chimed in, sensing a theme. Got it in one. Flowey sighed. Who named these places? She laughed. Flowey crossed his leaves and looked down. Our king, Asgore. He's not the most creative sort. He lives in Newhome, just past Hotland. That is where the exit to the underground is. And the barrier. At Dahlia's confused cock of the head, he continued. The barrier is a powerful force of magic that doesn't allow anything out, so monsters have been trapped behind it for hundreds of years. Dahlia nodded, taking in everything she could. Not just because it was important, but because it was interesting. Okay, so what's the deal with this kill or be killed motto? That was started by Asgore. There's a whole story behind it, but no one really talks about it anymore. Flowey took a deep breath. Look, let's just say monsters followed their king in his despair. They are short-tempered, fight a lot. Monsters get dusted every day from stupid fights that start over something as dumb as an odd sideways stare. Dusted? Huh? Oh, right. Monsters are made of magic, unlike humans. When a monster dies, their body turns to dust. That was an odd piece of information. Turning to dust. So do monsters bleed if they get hurt? And if there is no body, how do they mourn when someone passes away? There would be no burial site, no place to visit on that painful day every year. Dahlia felt an old hurt build in her heart as she thought of it. This was not the time to let her emotions take control, though, she thought as she shook her head. Dahlia? Are you all... Flowey gasped. his whole face darkening as he looked past Dahlia. Slowly, she turned her head and looked up at the face of a true monster.